Lon Safko. We're officially started because the recording is in progress. So just so you all know, we are now officially recorded and officially started.
Yay.
And I want to introduce, not the speakers just yet, but the woman who got us started, who brought us to this day, as we say, and that's Gloria Peterson, who is an author of multiple books, 5, I think, and a Global Chamber member, and was the woman who had the idea to do an authors series. So Gloria, welcome. We're really happy that you could join us this morning. And you can see Dwayne Canova's photo, and eventually we'll see him. He is one of the planning committee and who has been working to bring this part of the series with you. He is a Global Chamber author and was in the original series. And Lothar, you are also a Global Chamber authors, and I think are on the schedule later in the series. Am I right?
I'm not on any schedule.
You're
No, I'm just a bystander. I'm kind of a neophyte compared to some of the Global Chamber authors.
Well, you are a frequent attendee, and I'm always glad to see you because you always have something interesting to add. So here's the plan for the morning. We're going to hear from Lon and Michael about the books they wrote, why they wrote, some of how they assembled their community. And that'll take us, I don't know, about 20 minutes-ish. And then we'll open it up for some questions and comments from the group. So as you have, oh, Professor Ansis, another Global Chamber author from the authors series. It's fabulous to have everybody coming back and sharing. But anyway, I digress. We'll hear from our 2 folk authors this morning. Then we'll open it up for a little bit of question and answer, and then we'll go back and have them finish us out. So as you have an idea, a question, something you want to ask, if you would use the little feature that puts your hand up, that way we can see who has a question and we will catch you before we're done. So I suspect that you both have all seen the bios of Michael and Lon, but I'm going to reintroduce them briefly. And then I'm going to ask them to tell you about the books they've written, why they wrote them, a little bit of their experiences, whether they write with the computer or pen and paper on a yellow pad like I do, so that you have a little more background, and then we'll go forward. So Michael Tucker, as you may know, is an executive coach. He works with his clients to develop their creativity and their communication skills. He is an author of 2 books that are published and 1 that's in the works. So by the time we're done, he will have 3 books to his credit. And he's unique, I think, in our authors group, that his books have been collaborations with other colleagues. So it's going to be interesting to hear him talk about his built-in community. He also is the co-founder and director of Coaching for Everyone, an organization that is dedicated to increasing the diversity of coaches and providing complementary coaching for previously underserved communities. That's Michael. And Lon is a prolific author with 24 books. I think he beats all of us if we were counting, but we're not counting really. He's an inventor, a founder of 14 companies. He has multiple patents. He's been one of his books was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. He's a pretty terrific guy and has a great sense of humor. We only have authors who have great senses of humor. So those are our 2 gentlemen. And Michael, I'm going to ask you to hold on for 1 minute, because I see that our leader, our guide, our most amazing friend, to use his word, Doug, is in the house. Doug, would you like to say hello this morning to our group?
You know, I don't have a sense of humor, so am I allowed to say anything?
Nope, sorry, turn your camera back off.
Yeah.
You know, these are two amazing people that you have the honor to speak with today, and I'm sure all of us are waiting with bated breath. Both are very not just prolific, but really smart folks. I mean, Lon is off the charts. He's like just a crazy guy from Ossining that should be probably guarded in some way that he doesn't cause some damage to the universe and the warp speed of the Earth spinning and things like that. God knows.
Thank you. I've made that deposit in your account for introducing me like that. Thank you.
You know, he grew up in the shadows of Sing Sing prison, so that I think that says all that you need to know about
Stop.
And that's where Doug and I met. So
Okay, well, do you guys just want to continue?
I love it.
I'm looking forward to hearing from all three of you today and having all of us learn. This is an important topic, right? Building a community, no matter what you're doing, right? Whether you're running a business or whether you're writing a book, this is really key. So I'm sure we're going to get all sorts of snippets. So I'm here with my notepad all ready to go. Looking forward to learning today. Thanks, guys. And thanks.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for making this all possible. And somewhere behind the scenes is Cesar. And I want to say good morning to him and thank you for letting us in and making it possible for us to have this meeting. Now, having done all that intro stuff, let's pitch the ball to Michael. And do you want to start out by telling us a little bit about the books you've written, why you wrote them, and give us some background before we start to talk about today's topic? And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. And if you go over, I'm going to be the woman doing this waving of the hands. So the floor is yours, Michael. Thank you again for being here and sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I just want to clarify something. So I'm not the director of Coaching for Everyone.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's totally okay. But we've got some new big things coming up. So more on that later. But so a little bit about the books that I wrote and how that whole process got started for me. So I guess about 7 or 8 years ago, a couple of folks that I knew decided that they wanted to write some books. It was a woman in particular. She and I actually met at a SBA conference, and she was doing a lot of speaking events, particularly with young people at high schools and so forth. And so she wanted to put together this book series. And so she gathered about, I guess it was about 10 or 15 of us. And each of us committed to writing a portion of the first book, which was called My Vision, My Now. But again, it was for, for young people. My Vision, My Plan, My Now. That was the name of the book. And so this was all about inspiring young people to see their greatness, and to really feel connected to a group of authors who maybe have been through similar challenges as they have been. And so we delivered that book, and it was a process. It really was a process, and I'll get into that. And then the second book, My Now for the Entrepreneur, was a similar kind of concept, except for this book was for entrepreneurs. And so what I would say, in choosing to write a book, especially if you do it with a group, I tongue in cheek, joke tongue in cheek that I'm kind of a cameo author. So I I show up in the works of other people, kind of like Captain America. He's in all these different pictures throughout history. I'm that guy when it comes to writing. And so in this third book, which is a book that we are delivering for Coaching for Everyone, which is really about a young man. This will be my first my first fiction book, but it's about a young man who is considering coaching as a profession, and he has a diverse background, and this is about his journey into that profession. And so, but what I will say is that as you think about writing doing a book project, if you're thinking about doing it with a group, you want to make sure, number one, you're doing it with a group of people that you like. A group of folks that are committed not just to the book project, but to the reason why you're delivering the book. That makes a big difference. And then ultimately, if you want to have some.
हमारी कांसानी के लिए प्लेट कहाँ है?
All right.
कांसा पे लोग हलवा करवा मारे.
All right. I don't know if there's a way to mute that.
क्या
But
करने के मने?
Hit mute, Mona.
there we go. So no, and then finally, I was going to say the next thing is you want to make sure that you've got someone who can corral all the cats and make sure that everything is going as planned, because that is the challenging part in terms of making sure that you deliver a solid product. You're on mute there, Lainey.
I think I'm going to start wearing a badge. I'm always on mute. Nope. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. So Michael, one other small detail, but when you write, do you write on the computer? Do you dictate it? What's your process of getting the idea from your head to a piece of paper or to something that can be published in that way, the practical stuff?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. And I write based on how I feel. And there are a lot of people that everyone has their own way of writing. And so some days I feel like sitting at the computer and writing. Some days I feel like writing on a piece of paper. Some days I feel like not getting out of bed and hammering away on my cell phone in one of the notes applications. And I think it's important for me to have that, because it allows me to continue the process no matter what. When you start writing, what you're going to find is every single possible excuse not to show up to write. I promise you. And so if how you do this writing is no longer an excuse, then it keeps you in the game.
Okay. All right. It's important to know how to manage those moments when you think you cannot write one more thing. So I can see Lon nodding. So maybe if you're nodding, you want to pick up the ball and start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a creative process. Whether you're an artist or a music, you write lyrics or music, or you write books, it's being creative, and we don't always feel creative. And sometimes we feel creative in different environments. So whether I'm building a piece of furniture or inventing something, or if I'm writing, the process that I go through is I actually do it in my head. But you can't write a book like the Social Media Bible, which was 850 pages, and I think it was 28 chapters and had 50 contributors. You have to look at it as, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So the most important thing is never get overwhelmed when you start writing a book. Just look at the first chapter and look at the bullet points and pick out the first subheading and just think about what you are going to say. And then what happens is that when I sit down, and I use a Macintosh, a computer, of course, it just flows out, just as if I was teaching somebody or explaining it. I type it as fast as I can, and then until I run out of ideas, and then I go back and then I fix the spelling and the sentence structure and all of the technical stuff, but I don't let that interrupt the creativity. The other thing that's really important to me is I have to get out of the office. I cannot be creative in my office at all. So most of my books were either written at Starbucks, in a friend of mine's cabin in upstate Arizona, or at a hotel room. I actually rented hotel rooms just to lock myself away, and I could punch out literally an entire book in a day.
Wow.
That way.
I think you touched on what Michael touched on in a way, about, you mentioned having multiple contributors in your book. So you're the guy who had to wrangle the cats, which was what Michael talked about. And I take it, Michael, you were not the cat wrangler. You were one of the cats, right?
I was definitely one of the cats, one of the contributors. But you have to treat those people very nicely.
Yes, and I think that launches us really into that conversation about your community, because Michael, you have a built-in community because you're one of a group of people who are writing a book. Lon, you invited people to contribute, so you created a community in that way. But last week, Dwayne talked about community in terms of he has people review his books as he's writing. So starting with you, Michael, could you talk a little bit about how you managed as a group to come together? And also, did other people in your group review what you wrote? Or did you have a separate set of colleagues outside that circle that reviewed what you wrote? And then Lon will toss the ball to you to talk about it, but let's start with Michael. One of the cats, talk about herding cats and being a cat and how that community goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so two different experiences. So for the first two books, it was centrally controlled primarily. So the young woman who led the project, she received all the content. She had, the folks who reviewed everything and, provided some feedback. And that was that. And this third project, the one that I'm finishing now with Coaching for Everyone, that's been a little more dynamic in the sense, especially because it's a fiction book. And everybody kind of has to have an idea of what the other people are talking about. Otherwise, the story doesn't make sense. So, so we've got a couple of individuals who are responsible for reviewing and editing, but they're also responsible for making sure that certain writing deadlines are met, and that we have certain meetings where people talk about what they're writing about, and then ultimately as drafts are finished, you're expected to read what everybody has written to make sure that it all makes sense, and your contribution is actually a contribution and not somewhere off in left field.
Okay, so your community comes together all the way through the process of writing the book.
Absolutely, at different milestones. Absolutely, there's definitely the coming together.
Okay, all right. So that's an interesting process. I wrote one of the books I wrote with a co-author. So there was a lot of back and forth, but it was mostly just the two of us partnering through the process, much different than your group. And Lon, you've done individual books where you were the sole writer, yes?
Yeah, almost all of those of the 22, 24 books that I've written. I think only one other time that I have a co-author, but the Social Media Bible, I had 50 contributors, and I was working with John Wiley and Sons. And of course, I was working with 5 different editors. It got to the point after they sent back the final manuscript, I wasn't even sure who wrote that. It didn't sound like mine at all, but it was good. So yeah, it's a lot of work herding 50 cats.
But when you weren't in the process of herding 50 cats, with the other books where you were the sole author, did you develop a community that read for you? Could you talk a little bit about that? I know what that's like when you've got a publisher who has an editor who's reading for you. And sometimes you get an editor who was a grammar teacher and sends you back your things all marked up in red ink. I had one of those, but did you? What have your readers looked like?
Yeah, I certainly had one of those editors. There was no question about it. It was really funny, but I was always appreciative because the work was always better if they could fix all the technical issues. When you're launching a book, the goal, of course, is to sell as many as possible. Nowadays, the most important thing is to make that impact on Amazon, so that Amazon's algorithm will pick you up and turn you into banners and suggestions, and you'll show up higher in the search engines. So it's really an entire process from the time you first first conceptualize the book until the book actually is already out for a while. So in the beginning, you're going to set up a pre-launch kind of a campaign, and you're pushing it out to your social platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of the platforms, getting people excited, anticipating the release of this book. Then you actually working on the book. If necessary, you bring in contributors so that you're working with those people. And the key to doing that is that the people that I always brought in were either competitors, because I wanted to take them out as competitors, because if they contributed, they had to participate and they had to help me sell my book, and they no longer were competitors, but also contributors. So during the process, there's all of these people that you're thinking about that can help you promote the book. Then when the book is ready to go out, again, for an example, the Social Media Bible, we sent out about 150 review copies to some of the biggest bloggers, most important social media people on the planet. And we got reviews, we got support, and you just keep that continuously going. And you have to continuously build that email list, that Facebook following, that LinkedIn connection list, so that you can keep pushing it out, so that you can keep pushing sales.
But before you get to that point, as you were writing, you come out of your hotel room, you've got the basics of what you think is the book. Do you have your family read it? Do you have a friend who is a good source of some commentary who you trust? You know, Dwayne, I think, always is very brave sending something out to a whole bunch of people. So before you get to the marketing, while you're still writing, do you have a community that reviews at that stage, or no?
You know what? I tried that, and it kind of confused me, because everybody's got a different opinion. It'd be the same thing if I was painting a landscape and I asked people to come in and contribute and guide me. You know, you'd have, oh, I don't like that tree over there, or I think you had. And so what happens is, for me anyway, it kind of disturbed the process. So no, in most cases, I would just push the entire book out. And then there's a couple of people that, if it's a real advanced marketing book, for example, Dr. Gary Witt, who also lives there in the Valley in Scottsdale, I'd have him review it just technically to make sure that I was on the right track. But for the most part, no, I push it out. After publishing that many books, my families don't even want to look at any more of my books. They're like, oh, no, not another one.
Well, I think that you touched on one of the other issues that we wanted to look at today is, if you do have other people read, how do you sort out that commentary to still stay focused on what your why, your vision of the book was? And Michael talked about the way they do it when they're multiple contributors. So I think that's something to think about, is don't show it to them, and it simplifies it. I know my experience was either an editor looking at it or my co-author, and that worked really well for us. But we sort of had split it up, and we had agreed we'd read for each other. And so everybody has a different approach, but we've talked, you guys have been very generous and talked a bit, and I don't see any hands up with questions. Yes, I'll come back to you in just a minute.
Okay.
But for the rest of the group, if you have questions or things that intrigued you, or you want to have a comment about, we'll let Lon, because he's the man right now, go first. And then I just saw the professor wave his hand. And then anybody else who wants to comment or has a question, if you'll use the reaction feature with a raised hand, we'll be able to know that you want to talk. So first Lon, then the professor, and then we'll add anybody else who wants to contribute.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add one thing, which was completely different than any of the books that I had written. Again, let's go back to the Social Media Bible. That was the biggest book by far. To this day, it's the biggest book ever written on social media. So before I did the book, I actually got a list of over 1,000 business people. Some I knew, some I didn't know. And I pushed out just a real short survey. And that was back in the days where people were actually willing to take a survey. And I said, what do you want to see in a book? And I put together like 10 questions, because I could write a book any way you want. I don't care what the format is. You tell me what you want. And what I stumbled upon was, if you ask your customers what they want as a product, and then you deliver that product, they'll buy it. And that's how it sold 75,000 copies, because I looked at over 1,000 responses, put them in a spreadsheet, compiled it, took the most common elements, and that turned out to be the format of the book. And it became popular because of that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That is really a great tip for all of us, no matter what your book is about. So thanks, Lon. Professor, and then Junko, I'll come to you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Lainey. Thank you, Michael and Lonnie. Lon, you have been our guide. I have a question is, let me make a statement, then ask a question. The statement I have to make is that in the world of creating services and products, one starts from the consumer. What does the consumer want? And what does the consumer need? Or the intelligent companies who make money do. So from a writer point of view, when I wrote the book with Victoria, actually, I was sort of reflecting the trainings we gave for about 35 years, so about 80,000, 90,000 people, so there are many. So all these seminars, 100 to 100 people, all these questions, when we wrote the book, we actually addressed the book from the point of view of those people who attended our seminars. And I was wondering if you have done the same thing in your books, or you just simply wrote the book and then, whatever the target is, the target is.
Michael, do you want to take that? And then Lon?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first two, no, that wasn't necessarily the approach. There was a sense of, we had a sense of what some of the concerns were, just from our, experience, but we didn't do as deep as, customer validation, if you will, or reader validation in this particular instance. This particular project with Coaching for Everyone that I'm working on, yes, we did have conversations with coaches, and particularly diverse coaches, and some of the concerns that they had, and those eventually became the chapters of the book. And to your point, Lon, about identifying influential leaders to connect with the project, that's something that we've been working on as well.
Okay, thank you. Lon, you want to add anything to what you said before?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the books that came after the Social Media Bible, for about the last 10 or 12 years, I've been traveling all over the world, way back in the olden days, BC, before COVID. And I worked with a lot of executives and taught all over the world. And what would happen is I would see patterns of questions arising, like generational marketing, or the biggest one was innovation. The Innovative Thinking Bible came out of it. What they all realized is that I can teach you every single tool in advanced marketing. And that means that every competitor, every person in this room has exactly the same tool set that you have. So what's going to differentiate you? So what happened was I began speaking about innovation, because innovation and creativity set them aside from everybody else using the same tools. And then that grew into a 15-minute segment and eventually an hour segment. And then I realized that there was a need for that. So that I sat down and wrote a 350-page book just on innovative thinking, because I realized that's in everybody's mind. And it was a valuable concept to address.
Which I think tells us that figuring out who's the customer and what they want comes to you in multiple different ways. And it's about really being aware of what's going on around you and turning that into a book. And now, Junko, you've been waiting patiently. Welcome. Junko Horvath is one of our Global Chamber authors. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Junko Horvath. I'm a CEO of the Fujiyama Wealth Management. I wrote a book called Women in Financial Transition earlier this year. And so to help the women in the financial transition, such as divorcing, retiring, inheriting money, and becoming a widow, and selling their successful business. And I have a question. Ron mentioned that it's important to increase the number of people in your network through Facebook and LinkedIn and or other social channels. But like, for example, for LinkedIn now, even with the premium, I think that you can only connect to 5 people per day. It used to be more like 50 a day. I think it's 5 a day now. And in that kind of environment, what's the best way to gain those people's email address, and what's the fastest way, most effective way? And
Yeah.
how do you use it to sell your business, sell your book? And I believe that selling your book is very important, but ultimately, probably by using your book, you try to get new client, right? How do you convert that from the selling the book to turning them to your client? What kind of marketing, do you use? And that's what I want to learn.
Yeah, that's a really big problem right now, is getting out there and building a following, or what we call a tribe. 10 years ago, it was about, everything used to be about your digital footprint. You Google somebody and how many index pages they have. Now it's really about the social footprint. So for example, if you go into Wiley or Pearson or McGraw-Hill, the first thing that they're going to ask is they're going to want a complete summary on how many people are following you on every one of the social networks, because they know that they don't have the ability any longer to sell books. And they know that being that you have built a trusted relationship with all of these people, they're going to count on you to sell between 5,000 and 10,000 books to your tribe. And if you can't prove that, they're not going to do a book with you. That's how important it is. Just yesterday, I talked to a friend of mine who is a reporter for Forbes magazine, and they took him off the social media beat, even though he's been writing prolifically articles for the last 5 years. He didn't have a big enough social following, so they basically told him they were going to fire him. So it's really critical to have that social footprint, and you have to be creative. You got to do giveaways. I have about 8,000 people in my email list, and I constantly give them the opportunity to either buy the book at a discount, or I give them the book, because like you said, the ROI on a book, you really got to get struck by lightning to make money on a book. There's no ROI, but it's a brochure that your prospects are willing to pay for. And that's absolutely true. It gives you credibility. So you got to get creative. You got to look at every single platform. You got to see the mindset that's involved in that platform. And you got to do giveaways. You got to do contests. You got to give them reasons to sign up and to pass your name along to other people that trust them, so that that trust follows into your network. But it's really critical.
Thank
Mike,
you.
thanks, Junko, for a great question. Michael, you want to add anything to that? Or Gloria or Dwayne, you have any comment from your experience that you want to add into that?
I would just say that social media is an interesting animal. I actually ran a marketing company focused on social media for about 8 years. It is an interesting animal. And honestly, when I started to think about my books and connecting with folks, that wasn't the route that I focused on primarily. The opportunity that I really seized upon was speaking. And so the books get you in front of the room. The social media helps you collect all of those folks that you got in front of the room and keep in communication with. And so that was the angle that I took. And of course, whenever there's opportunities to do, events like this or podcast or other opportunities, that book, like Lon was saying, this kind of becomes your brochure, and it just opens the door for these other opportunities. And it's just kind of this cycle that just keeps happening.
Right. And I think I always think about it as the best business card I have. Somehow, not too long ago, I was talking to a trade commissioner, about generally work I do. And as soon as I said, oh, by the way, I wrote this book and I'd be happy to send you a copy, there was a big shift in the conversation. Suddenly I had some credibility because somebody published my book. So I understand what you're talking about, is the ROI is not from the direct sales of the book. It's from the other things that come to you. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Professor, you're wiggling your fingers.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that what seems to be the trend today in the, let's call it the self-publishing book industry. And it started about 5-6 years ago. And today, the same way you go to the movie, you're attracted to a movie and have a trailer. Today, many book writers with interesting books have trailers, video trailers, and they use YouTube very successfully. In fact, Janko, the suggestion that I would have for you, if you're looking to create a following, utilizing YouTube and a trailer discussing your book, which sounds fantastic for women. And then there are 3 or 4 global women organizations with more than 1 million members each. They would be, you join them for maybe $400, $500 a year, and then you get a platform whereby you can have their members listening to you. So there are different strategies in marketing to market a book.
Okay, thank you. I see Gloria has her hand up, and then we'll go to Doug. You're muted, Gloria.
I'm so engaged listening to all of this, but there's just no magic way. I just kind of settled into the fact that it's my credibility card, and I work it from that point of view. I know that the books that I have written have now got to be revised and updated because so much has changed since I wrote them. I will say that when I did write all 4 books, I was very concerned that the topic of business etiquette, the topic of professional presence protocol, all of that, I didn't want to dictate that in my books. I wanted to find out how that looked and felt within different organizations and industries. So I would reach out to my clients, and I would also reach out to industry experts. Like maybe I need a wine sommelier. I can take wine to a certain point, but I can't take it to the point where the reader wants to know. And I would actually dedicate a chapter to somebody in that profession or as an expert to write that piece for me. And I did that even with Doug when it comes to how to be a people connector. Who knows it better than Doug does? And he's in a chapter in one of my books. So I did that as far as building my community. But what I want to throw at you right now, and I think it's an area that we haven't talked about, but I think it's equally important. We've talked about community, we've talked about contributors, but let's talk about how you got your endorsements. Because I worked really hard at getting my endorsements. And I know in books, the first 2 or 3 pages, or maybe page 1, 2, maybe page 1, 2, 3, and 4, is nothing but all these endorsements. And I know how I went about getting mine, but I'd like to know how you went about getting yours, because I think that's key also. Go for it.
Michael?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the project that we have coming out with Coaching for Everyone, this will be the first project where I've been on a project where I'm actively seeking out these endorsements. And fortunately, our team is, these are very, very big players in the coaching space. And so they're connected with some of the top leaders. And so we have a strategy for connecting with these individuals, giving them advanced copies of what's written, and inviting them to make that endorsement if they choose. That is still ongoing with us, and so maybe this time next year I'll have more to say about it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Lon, do you want to add anything? And then we'll go to Doug.
Yeah, endorsements are really important because when people look at the book, when they're skimming through the first couple of pages on Amazon and they see big names that they recognize, again, that trust that they have in that name, that brand carries through into your book because they're cooperating with you. So when I do my books, first thing I do is I go through all my Rolodex. Who do I know that's got a big name or works for a company with a big name? That's the first thing. And then I look at my Rolodex. You notice I'm using Rolodex. Oh my God, that's a big mistake. I just saw somebody pull a Rolodex out on a movie last night. It was like, wow, that's an antique. Don't lose that. So I go through my contact list and find out who do I know that know other people. And then sometimes I just cold call. So for example, I'm connected with, I'm friends with 14 of the most successful New York Times best-selling authors in marketing. So anytime I'm going to do a book, I just push it out to them, and I'll usually get a dozen out of the 14 endorsements from them, and they're huge because they're New York Times bestsellers. So that's one way of doing it. And I'm looking for corporate names. So for example, General Mills and Levi Strauss, and I know people that work for those companies. They're happy to do it because they get a little bit of cred too. They get their name on a book, and that makes them excited. Then you send them a copy of the book, and then they go crazy promoting it.
Okay, everybody wins in that scenario. That's really great.
Could you edit out Rolodex, please?
Doug, you had your hand up a minute ago.
I wanted to ask a question building back to what Lon said about lightning striking only a few books to make money. So I guess a couple things. Why do it? And could you talk a little bit about that? And Lon in particular, 24 books. Do you have regrets about writing some of certain books, and what have been your best ones, kind of in retrospect? And could you speak to both of you speak to the synergy, right? So if you're not going to make a lot of money, that means, I guess, legacy is part of it, and then the synergy with other things that you're doing. And so could you talk a little bit about kind of where that's worked and how you've made it work for other things to add value from the book?
Yeah, the lightning strike came out of a conversation that I had with Eric Qualman. Eric Qualman wrote Socialnomics, which was huge in the beginning of social media. And he was going out 2-3 times a week doing $30,000 an hour keynotes. I wasn't. And I asked him, I said, what's the difference? And he said, well, your book is actually much better than mine. He says, I wrote mine and I've read yours. Yours is better. He said, but what happened was, he says, I did this stupid little video, threw it up on YouTube. And one of the vice presidents of Yahoo saw it. And this is in the days when Yahoo actually meant something. They just made it the banner for their news feed for 2 days in a row because they loved the video, and that catapulted them. So what I realized is that when you do this, you have to have that lightning strike, because it's not just about opportunity. Preparation meaning opportunity, that's the definition of success. Well, you'll be successful, but it won't be wildly successful unless that lightning hits you. Something comes from out of the blue and makes it stand out. Otherwise, you're just one of what's the recent number? 48,500,000 books on Amazon. What was the other part of your question, Doug? I'm sorry, I'm over 60, so I could only do one thing at a time.
I file it in your Rolodex.
You got to rub that in.
It was, given that you've had 24 books, do you have some regrets on certain books that you wrote and the time and effort that it took to do that? And then on the positive side, what were the superstars and why? And then the third part of the question, sorry, was the synergy between why you write the book, right? Presumably you're writing the book and there's a business benefit to it, right? In your case, probably speaking gigs, right? Without all those books, are you going to get hired? They'll find out you're from Ossining and it's like, hey, wait a minute. So you know how that works. So sorry to confuse you with multiple questions.
No, that's great. That's great. No, I don't regret any of the books. Every single book that I wrote is because I had something to say. I mean, that's really psychologically what it came down to. And it was something that maybe in most cases, nobody had ever thought of before. And in most cases, it turned out to be business and marketing. But as you know, I discovered the Lost Dutchman gold mine in Arizona in 1992. And I was approached by a publisher out of London that asked me to write some stories about that. And I'd never written fiction in my life, and I did, and one of them hit #1 on Amazon, which shocked the heck out of me. And then I came up with this really amazing idea that no one has ever thought of about aliens and time travel, and so I wrote that book, and it hit #1 on Amazon. And it's a fluke. I had no idea that I could write fiction, but it just accidentally happened. So no regrets other than most of them don't sell more than 1 or 2 copies a month because it's tossed into this pile of 48.5 million books. But yes, it gives you credibility, as we just heard earlier, and that led to speaking, which really kept me employed for more than a decade.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of it was the credibility bump that you get for people to hire you and make gazillions of dollars on that side of it.
Gazillions yes, accurate. Yeah.
Michael, do you want to share
Yeah,
your story? Go ahead.
absolutely. I would say I don't have any regrets about anything I've written. I have more regrets about the things that I haven't written.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's
I mean,
that's a
Well
Maya
spoken.
Angelou quote.
I really do feel that way. And one of the things that I've thought about this through the years, and one of the things, the stories that I find is going on in the back of my mind when I haven't put content out is, oh my gosh, this is going to be outdated, or oh my gosh, my idea about this is going to change. And so I would encourage anyone who's thinking about that to just let that go. And if your idea does change in the future, great. This is another opportunity to write something else. And then as far as why I write, yeah, it's fun to speak. And I have traveled the world, speaking. That's been an adventure. But the process of writing for me, I would say, is a lot more personal. It's about self-reflection. It's about personal exploration and personal transformation. And then there's just this journey, because you give your word to deliver something, and the confidence that comes with keeping that word through the process is transformative. And so for me, the writing process is, like I said, it's definitely a little more personal and a little more inward. And then of course there's this, legacy piece. I don't have children, but I do have nieces and nephews. And the idea that I could be leaving something behind for them to at least, have a glimpse of their uncle, that means a lot to me.
Very nice. Well spoken.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the time, so I have a couple questions I want to ask both of you. And one of them is, what's been the most successful of the elements of the work you've done? What do you consider the most successful? And what's one thing that didn't work out? And I'm thinking not just in the books that are published, but in the process. Let's go back to the process of reaching out, getting things reviewed, learning how to write. What's been the most successful thing over the years? And what's one thing that you thought would really work well that turned out not to be so good? Lon, you write about learning from things that don't work out so well. And I think it would be good to share those things, because maybe that's a path somebody won't take having listened to you. So do you want to start out and then toss the ball to Michael? What's worked really well and what looked good on paper and didn't turn out so well?
Yeah, as we spoke earlier, that I learned much more from my failures than my successes, which means that I've learned an awful lot. So, well, getting back to the first real successful book that I had was the Social Media Bible. It was a good decision, and I had no one else had ever done it, is bring in 50 different contributors. So I brought in the vice president of Google, the vice president of LinkedIn, the vice president of Facebook, the Biz Stone, who invented Twitter, and Matt Mullenweg, who invented WordPress, because I didn't understand the details of the work. Plus, it was everything in social media. So by bringing them in, people could read all of this information, but then get these insights from the people who actually invented the technology I was talking about. I didn't think it was going to have as big of an impact as it did. I did it to make my job a little easier. I'd write the entire chapter and then give them 2 pages at the end. But it actually turned out to be a really good formula, these fresh approaches. As far as things that didn't work, to be honest with you, I can't say that working with the major publishers, and I've been published through Pearson, John Wiley & Sons, and McGraw. I love them dearly, but the process was less than fun and much less than profitable. So I find, considering the fact that publishing is really the Latin word for printer, because they do absolutely no marketing whatsoever for you, that I'm probably just as well off just working Amazon the best that I can. That way I have full control. The other thing is when you go to a legitimate publisher, they own 100% of your work. Every word belongs to them. If I take even a sentence out of my book and use it without their permission, I could literally get sued. So that was a problem. At least if I self-publish, I have more control and I actually own the copyrights and I can do anything I want with it. So it was definitely a learning process.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Lon. Michael?
Yeah, so I would say what's worked really well. Maybe I'll start with what hasn't worked. So what hasn't worked is for me is goofy rituals. And what I mean by that is, early on I read all this stuff, how to create the environment and, drink some tea before you write and clean your office. Well, pretty soon I was drinking tea and cleaning my office and I never wrote anything. So that didn't work well for me.
Clean office.
Great.
Yeah. And the office wasn't even clean because I wasn't even interested in doing that. Right. But what worked really well, honestly, what has worked consistently time and time again for me is giving myself permission to show up and be present at a certain time that I choose. And it could be multiple times a day, but giving myself permission, loving myself to just show up. That's what works. And it works consistently.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
good.
very much, very much. Before we talk about next week, I just want to find out from both of you, is there something that I didn't ask you that you wanted me to? Is there something you'd like to share with us that we didn't get to? No, we're good.
Good.
so
I can't.
far?
Great questions. This was a pleasure to be part of. Thank you.
We've had a really good morning so far. Michael, I don't see you nodding, like waving your hands and saying, wait, Lainey.
Oh no, I could probably talk for another hour on this topic, but no, I think you hit on the core message here. So thank you.
Well, we hope you're going to come back every week and share with the other authors as we go through the series. Next week, I think Lon overheard and did a little intro for us, because next week is, do we self-publish or do we look for a traditional publisher? Things you need to know. So for everybody, you got a preview of that discussion right now. We have Jacqueline Wales, who wrote The Fearless Factor, and Dale Walters, who's written some interesting books about taxes and real estate between the US and Canada. And it's another chance to look at somebody who's written something that has a very narrow market, but boy, when they need that information, that's what they need. And so I encourage you all to come join us again next week and hear some more conversation about self-publish or traditional publisher. And Gloria is going to be the moderator, so we know it's going to be a great session. And we have about 4 minutes before we're at the top of the hour. So I am going to give you one more chance to say something, or else we're going to give you back 4 minutes of your life before you get on the next Zoom call. And I see
Adesola had a question for you, for the group in the chat room.
Okay, let's see what that is. Thanks, Professor. But don't know how to go about it. Well,
what advice do you give to a new writer?
Yeah, the advice that I would give is just write. Don't think too much about it. Get yourself a Word document up on your screen or a notepad, and maybe you start by thinking about what you want to talk about. I'm a big fan of these mind maps. Love them. So I'll do like mind maps, and then that helps you come up with some of the things that you want to write about, and you just go from there. And I would say this: trust yourself during this process. There's 1,000 different ways to get up this hill, but find your special way and be willing to practice, to fail, and to give yourself permission to do so. don't be hard on yourself during this process. Just keep going.
And I would second Michael that a mind map is a great useful tool in many ways. And there's a good book or 2 books out there about mind mapping if it's something that's new to you. And it'll help you clarify some of your ideas about writing your book and what you want to have in it. So thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. I hope that you will join us next week as we continue to explore this topic. And we look forward to seeing you again. And if you want to reach out to anybody, we're all on the Global Chamber member list. So you can find us all, and we'd love to hear from you. Doug?
This was great, Lainey. Excellent.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
See you
Thanks,
guys
Doug.
next week.
Doug,
Thank
any
you.
Great job,
final
everybody.
goodbye? Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Cesar.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
We're good. That was great.
thank you. Thanks. What great guys. They were just terrific every step of the way. So see you next week and we'll have more fun. This was fun.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, Gloria.